Hey y'all, good morning. Hope you're doing well today. So today's message, I'm going to be pulling some Bible verses in. I'm going to be talking about a little section from Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. We're going to be pulling a little bit from that, actually in a section that we've already reviewed, but it's going to be a part that I haven't read before, as far as I can remember. But today's message is going to be centered around how to protect our heart, and specifically how we can change our perspective on some things, and not in the manner to fool ourselves, right? But specifically to gain more understanding from the wisdom that is in the Bible, specifically related to love. And this is something that is so, I feel like, multi-layered. It's such a profound topic in itself. And I just want to preface this conversation, this discussion, by pointing out that there is a difference in loving someone versus being in love with someone. And so I just want you to keep that in mind as we're going through everything that I've pulled together for the presentation. And as an example, when you take the phrase and the concept of being in love with someone, think about what that's really saying, right? It's describing a harmony of sorts, right? Being in something together with someone, right? Being in love with together someone. It's like really understanding what that means makes all the difference. And so when you consider after we come into the awareness that, there are people who are just very empty inside, they're living a false life, they're deceitful and manipulative, those kind of people, we understand that love put into action sometimes can be faked, right? And people do that for manipulative purposes. So it's not genuine by any means. It's based on expectations that they're going to get something out of you if they love bomb you or try to fake you off by mimicking those actions that people normally associate with love, right? Proof of love. So it's kind of like sitting with that for a little while. It's one of those things, I mentioned it before, it's kind of like you can feel really sure that you get something, but then when you go back, it's almost like that confidence, we can almost sometimes be, and I'm speaking from experience here, I feel like sometimes we can be overly confident thinking that we understand the concept, and by being overly confident we've only just scratched the surface of it and like got this just a bare bones kind of understanding, and that's actually working against us when we need to go back and revisit and spend time with, and really, again, it's not just getting wisdom but getting the understanding, that piece of it. Sometimes we need to go back and review some concepts that we thought we really got, to get the deeper message, because that can make all the difference in the world with regards to protecting yourself, your sanity, your mind, your heart, and because stress can kill you. Absolutely, it can kill you. Not to mention how it impacts your quality of life when you're living with incorrect paradigms that have been formed based on limited understanding. So getting that understanding is crucial. So I just I just want you to keep that in the forefront of your mind as we go through this discussion, and just understand that the intention here with this discussion is to protect your heart and to bring a deeper understanding, hopefully. That's what it's done for me, of some things, and also you may even view it like preventing preventing these horrible experiences that we went through from impacting you to the point that it feels like you're just operating with a bleeding heart. You feel vulnerable, you feel very just bitter about the world, distrustful of everybody, of all of humanity, and you're thinking on those Bible verses that say the human heart is deceitful above all and all this stuff, and you just, it's kind of like it, we're going to see also the connection between these experiences that we went through, trust and belief and faith, and also the connection with love. So I hope that you're doing well today. I hope that you enjoy the discussion today, and mostly I hope that it gets the wheels turning for you. And if you're new to my channel, I just want to mention that I'm always encouraging you to do your own seeking, and to use your own discernment, and to apply your own lens, what I like to call a lens, to anything that I present to you. So you don't have to share the same beliefs that I do. That's obviously for each person to decide on their own, but hopefully whatever lens I'm using in the moment, in a particular video presentation, I hope that you're able to just rise above that and apply your own lens so that you can make sense of the meat and potatoes of the message, and really pull something from it. And again, my goal is never to tell you what to think or believe, but just to get those wheels turning for you so that you can pull those puzzle pieces together on your own, connect those dots on your own, and just get a deeper understanding for yourself. So, all right, let's move forward. All right, so in getting familiar with the term that's hot right now is narcissism, right? With narcissistic people, and it is a spectrum, right? And it's very much aligned with ego, and we all have an ego. So it's not trying to proclaim that we're perfect or that anybody can even be perfect or anything like that. It's just whenever I use the phrase narcissistic people, it's just intended, it's just a quicker way to say someone who is, this is how I'm using the term, okay? And people may use it differently, but I'm using this term to mean people who are liars, and they're intentionally, on purpose, deceitful, and they want to use people for their own selfish purposes, right? So I'm not talking about people operating from the unconscious and sometimes, poor behaviors resulting from that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who consciously are doing others wrong for their own gain, okay? So as we get familiar with narcissistic people, we learn truly that people deceive. Some people deceive, and they're fine with it. They wear a mask. And also in learning this, we learn that they seem to be incapable of love. Okay, both giving and receiving. It just reminds me of that Bob Marley song, Could You Be Loved? I don't even know for sure if this is the lyric, but I've always sang it like, when you're singing along, I always sing it like, could you be love? Could you be love? Like, could you embody it and let that shine forth through you, through your actions? Could you be love and be loved? Can you give and can you receive? Because it seems like a person who can't do one can't do the other either, right? So I was inspired today by the message in John chapter 14. All right, so, and I just encourage you to read that if you have interest, because it's where Jesus is explaining to his disciples that he's going away, and he's trying to comfort them and say, look, don't worry. Don't worry, you're not going to be left alone. You're not alone. I'm here now, so you don't feel alone, but even when I go away, you're not going to be alone. you will be sent the Holy Spirit who will live and reside inside of you. So he's talking all about that, right? So specifically verse 11 says, believe me. So here we start getting into trust, right? Again, today's discussion is going to explain the relationship between faith and trust and love, okay? And I believe that when our faith is broken, just in general, because of all these horrible experiences with other people, it can affect our ability to love, to both receive it and give it. So there's a correlation there, and that's really central to the message today. So just remember that. So it says, again, verse 11, John 14 says, believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves. So see, here we have Jesus is explaining that. This goes right along with a tree is known by the fruit it bears. Love, or a person's character rather, can be seen through what they do, their actions and everything, right? That should be a basis to trust a person, right? But what happens with a deceitful person, this is where they mess up, this natural, normal mechanism within us, right, of how faith and trust works and all this. They present the fruit that looks like it's genuine, but it's not. And so we, of course, place trust in this person, and then we find out that the fruit was plastic. It was not even real. It looked great, but it wasn't real. Their works, it was just contingent and on their expectations and for manipulative purposes and all this stuff, and it was just totally based on falsehoods and lies, and I could go on and on, right? So it messes that dynamic up, like, oh, well, I can't look at the fruit a tree bears because it might be plastic fruit and I can't tell if it's plastic fruit, right? So just something to think about there, because he says at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves. So this is where you have to spend time. You have to spend time. You have to think on this deeper. You have to let it, sink in. You have to marinate on it. That's one of my favorite things to say. So when we talk about the concept of believing, because again, in that verse he says, believe me when I say I'm in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves. So when we take the concept of believing here and we look at that, 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is what defines love. That's where it talks about love being patient and kind, and it says love believes all things. So here we're starting to see that correlation between love and belief or trust, right? Love believes all things and hopes all things. So they're closely tied together. Hope, belief, or faith, and love. And even in the Bible, I forget what verse it is, it talks about these three things remain. Faith, hope, and love. And but it says the greatest of these is love. So even though they're related, there is a distinction. They're different. Okay? Really getting this and sitting with it is going to result ultimately, I hope, in peace for you and to protect your heart, right? Your beautiful heart, because it is beautiful. And we don't want to let deceitful people ruin love for us, both the ability to give it and to receive it, because that would be an extreme tragedy. All right. So again, 1 Corinthians 13 defines love. It believes all things and it hopes all things. So when our belief or our trust in someone has been proven to be exploited, it is directly related to our ability to love, right? And it's because we make, after this happens and we realize, okay, so maybe I shouldn't just give my trust away so easily and love someone so quickly, right? So what happens is we make the incorrect assumption that not having faith serves to protect us. We start to pull that back. As we're pulling back our trust in humanity, our love is also being pulled back, right? It's kind of like and what happens? What happens when, someone breaks your trust, like in a bad way, like a spouse or a parent or a best friend or a sibling, something like that, if it just really impacts you, you just kind of pull your trust back in all people because you're like, well, I was so easily fooled here. Maybe I'm being fooled everywhere. You don't really know now who to trust. You can't trust your judgment on who to trust, right? And so you're pulling that back. You're pulling your trust back, and you're also reserving your love in that way. But as you're pulling your faith and your trust in now, and you're bitter, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. You know what I mean? When somebody truly wrongs you, you have every right to be angry and to be bitter and to feel all the feelings, right? Just make sure you're feeling them in a healthy way where you're allowing them to sit with you for a minute, and you're allowing yourself to feel it. That's so healthy. But then just go ahead and let it pass. That's what they want to do. They want to come up and just by feeling it for a minute in a healthy way, you are validating that within yourself, and then just allow it to move on. Don't latch on to it. That can certainly result in just a lot of bad things for ourselves and others. But we're forming and going through these bad experiences. What's happening is, in all of our experiences in life, we're using those to refine our paradigms, which is our beliefs that we operate with in this life. So going through these things, being deceived, can make us form this incorrect paradigm that as long as we don't ever put trust in someone, then we're protected, we're safe. Okay, that's what happens. Now let's look at what is faith. Okay, and I looked this up in the online etymology dictionary, which I love, and it says belief, trust, confidence, reliance, and credence. Okay, and then what's interesting is, let's really take this deeper. Like, what does it mean to have faith? Okay, if proof is there, if we have something right smack in front of us, right, there's no need for faith. Remember that Jesus is telling his disciples in John 14 that he's going away, right? So he's trying to comfort them and give them trust in what he's saying. In verse 1 and 27, he says, do not let your hearts be troubled, even though he's going away. So going back to the online etymology dictionary, further exploring faith, it says assent of the mind to the truth of a statement for which there is incomplete evidence. So again, I think the Bible even says, blessed are those who believe, but blessed, even more so are those who believe and haven't seen. So, when it's not right there in front of you, right? So if love, going back to 1 Corinthians 13, if love believes all things, and we learn that we can't believe all things, especially with regards to people, right? We can't believe all people. It can affect our ability to love and to be loved and to recognize real love when it presents itself. So it's kind of interesting if we read in the online etymology dictionary about love. So this is cool. The Proto-Indo-European root is L-E-U-B-H. I don't know how to pronounce that. Lube? I don't know. To care, desire, love. It forms all or part of, this root here, forms all or part of belief. Or to believe. Wow. So right there we have this correlation between love and belief or faith. Okay. So in looking at belief in the online etymology dictionary, the West Germanic word, I hope I said that right, Germanic, West Germanic word, Galabon, G-A-Laubon, means to hold dear. Again, we're looking at the word belief now. It means to hold dear, to esteem, to trust. So there's definitely a correlation between love and trust and faith. And when your trust has been broken in humanity, it does affect our ability to love, to give, and to receive. It's just really important to get that message. So Jesus says in John chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, keep my commands. Okay, now what are his commands in this context, in this moment when he's saying this? He's instructing them to have faith in being given the Holy Spirit when he is physically gone, right? And then in verse 18 it says, I will not leave you orphans, I will come to you. Before long, the world will not see me anymore, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. On that day, you will realize that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. This is important for our message, okay? So we realize that our trust was exploited, and our love was also misplaced, along with that trust that we gave, right? So a big lesson here is to not let a few bad apples spoil the barrel, right? In other words, we have to be careful not to let these experiences form paradigms in our minds, in our hearts, that we then apply to all of humanity, okay? That's really important. And it's natural to do that. It's natural to have that tendency to want to do that for the purposes of protecting ourselves, right? Okay? And we learned that it's hard to keep faith and love itself, right? So I want to read a little section here from Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. If you have the paperback, it's going to be on page 156 to 157. It says, totem, tribal, racial, and aggressively missionizing cults represent only partial solutions of the psychological problem of subduing hate by love. They only partially initiate. Ego is not annihilated in them. Rather, it is enlarged. Instead of thinking only of himself, the individual becomes dedicated to the whole of his society. And he's got his emphasized. His society, okay? This is important. We're going to wrap it up. The rest of the world, meanwhile, that is to say by far the greater portion of mankind, is left outside the sphere of his sympathy and protection, because outside the sphere of the protection of his God. I think there's a typo here. I've read this and read this and read this statement. It doesn't make sense. I think there's some kind of run-on or missing word or something. And there takes place then that dramatic divorce of the two principles of love and hate, which the pages of history so bountifully illustrate. Instead of clearing his own heart, the zealot tries to clear the world. The laws of the city of God are applied only to his in-group, tribe, church, nation, class, or whatnot, while the fire of a perpetual holy war is hurled with good conscience, and indeed a sense of pious service, against whatever uncircumcised, barbarian, heathen, native, or alien people happens to occupy the position of neighbor. The world is full of the resultant mutually contending bands, totem, flag, and party worshipers. Even the so-called Christian nations, which are supposed to be following a world redeemer, are better known to history for their colonial barbarity and internecine strife. I had to look that word up. Internecine, which means it's bad for everybody. It's destructive for everyone, right? So they're better known for their colonial barbarity and internecine strife than for any practical display of that unconditioned love synonymous with the effective conquest of ego, ego's world, and ego's tribal God, which was taught by their professed Supreme Lord. Now, he's going to quote Luke chapter 6, verses 27 through 36. I'm going to read the way he's quoted that, okay? It says, I say unto you, love your enemies, do good to them which hate you, bless them that curse you, and pray for them which despitefully use you. And unto him that smiteth thee on the one cheek offer also the other. And him that taketh away thy cloak forbid not to take thy coat also. Give to every man that asketh of thee, and of him that taketh away thy goods ask them not again. And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. For if ye love them which love you, what thank have ye? For sinners also love them that love those that love them. And if you do good to them which do good to you, what thank have ye? For sinners also do even the same. And if ye lend to them of whom you hope to receive, what thank have ye? For sinners also lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love ye your enemies, and do good, and lend, hoping for nothing again. And your reward shall be great, and you shall be the children of the highest. For he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful. So that's initially feels like a big pill to swallow. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, that's hard. But let's dig a little bit deeper, okay? So what we learn here is there is a difference in love and trust, a big one, or there should be, okay? And I want you to remember there are different kinds of love too. We talked earlier about to love versus to be in love. That's a really critical difference here. We're going to talk about it. We're going to wrap that up as part of the message towards the end. But there's also like romantic love, charitable love. There's different kinds, right? So just keep that in mind. I think in this example that we just read here out of the book, that it's good to remember how love is defined in 1 Corinthians 13, right? Like he talks, for example, love bears all things. And then in what we just read, he's talking about turning the other cheek. So what we can pull from all this is a lot, but I'll point out some things. Number one, we aren't perfect. Humans in general are not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. That's by design. And people all throughout time have struggled with ego, okay, and egoic expectations, even meaning well, right? But having blind spots and an unconscious part of our psyche that we're operating from and all this stuff, right? We're never going to be perfect. We have to keep that in mind. Number two, there are genuinely people who intentionally deceive, abuse, and exploit our trust. They truly are empty souls, okay? And they're grand manipulators. Number three, if God works all things for the good of those who love him, then we can understand how true this verse is. So listen to this. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I want you to remember when he's talking about here, do not conform to the pattern of this world. I want you to remember what we just read in Campbell's book about how people can mean well and feel like they are a good and loving person, but they're getting wrapped up in their own tribe, their own family, their own friend or social circle, their own community or culture, whatever it is, and then they can feel good there, and then whoever, like he says, is outside that sphere is considered the other, right? Like, I feel like he's insinuating like not deserving of love, right? Bad. It's okay to not love those people out there, right? I'm trying to think how to say that. So what we have to do is to, like he says here, we're instructed, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And this is going to be beneficial not only to everyone that crosses your path in life, but also to you. So we're learning how to protect our heart also by transforming our mind, okay? So as we go through our spiritual journey and are transformed, the way we understand love is transformed too, or it should be, I think. This is my opinion, obviously. So what we have to come to understand is we don't have to prove the validity of what we experienced, all the horrible things we experienced, to ourselves by harboring hate in our hearts. I think sometimes it's like an automatic, unconscious thing that happens inside of us, that this bitterness, this resentment, this where we revoke trust altogether, and we don't realize love is, attached on, right? Because it hasn't been transformed yet. So it may start with understanding that you can still validate how awful and wrong the things were that you experienced. You can still validate that without harboring that hate inside of you, because it will corrupt your heart and be very unhealthy for you and others. So I also want to remind you here and myself that part of suffering is when there's an internal conflict of two or more things competing for acceptance within our mind and heart, right? There's like this, do they call it cognitive dissonance? Maybe it's like where, maybe not, maybe that's not the right place to use that term, but I know for sure that there's this resistance inside of us where you're unsettled when you're trying to reconcile two things that both seem true. So I think that what I'm talking about here is when we understand how awful these things were we went through, it kind of just feels natural to want to revoke the love there. And if there's a revocation, is that a word? Revocation of love, then it almost like by default means there's hate there, right? But we may not recognize it as that. But my point is, so now there's this conflict inside of you. There's love wants to be there, and depending on your spiritual walk, and having that divine spark inside of you, see, love is there, and then there's this conflict because there's this, you want to revoke your love too because it's attached to trust, and you've revoked your trust in humanity. So you see how there's that conflict there? That means you're not feeling peace. So, and I know this from, experience. So hate is not going to feel right inside of you because it's not in alignment with that divine spark that's living inside of you. Okay? But the problem is love also doesn't feel right either, because people have proven to be untrustworthy and exploitative and abusive and all this, right? So what's the solution? Our concept of love needs to be transformed, put through the refiner's fire, so that it's the kind defined by God, not the one based on egoic expectations. Remember, Luke chapter 6 says that that's not really love at all, right? If it's based on some kind of expectations from ego. And narcissists certainly fake love, right? For manipulative purposes. Their actions are contingent on their expectations, on getting something from you. So our love, we're not liars. We're not using people and abusing people, right? But again, we all have ego to some degree. So what happens when our love is transformed, this is my understanding at this point, is our love gets perfected as much as possible as a human being as we abandon expectations. And it doesn't mean that we associate with anybody and everybody and we just let people treat us however. It doesn't mean that. It's like, we're going to talk about this more, but it's detaching our love in a way that it's secured now, like a pearl that's protected. It's understanding the value of it. And the Bible, let me just explain how it doesn't mean we tolerate poor treatment or abuse or anything like that, because the Bible has many verses on walking away, only giving people 3 chances before you walk away, shaking the dust off, on discernment, explaining how a tree is known by the fruit it bears, and it says the human heart is deceitful, all this stuff. So the Bible, is explaining that we're not to associate with people who are choosing the darkness, right? So when we learn to redefine love, it enables us to feel peace inside, because we can both validate how wrong the things we experienced were, and we can feel peaceful because we aren't attaching our love onto these experiences, okay? The bonus is, by doing this, we're still capable of receiving love. We have now secured it. So now it's flowing through us and out of us. And so now we have, by refining and transforming our concept of love and what that really means, we're now capable of receiving it again, right? And enjoying that reciprocity with the right person who we choose to associate with through our sharpened discernment. So I hope this has been a good message for you. I hope that it's got the wheels turning for you. And I just thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.